So Painkiller was a great shooter that was very original and very fun. An expansion titled Battle Out of Hell was released about a year after, and this had new maps, new weapons, and was still just as fun as Painkiller ever was. Well, jump ahead 2 years later, and a mod was about to be released, but then picked up as a full game known as Painkiller Overdose. It got bigger and had an actual budget and was released. This is Painkiller Overdose, the first standalone expansion to Painkiller. Painkiller Overdose is a spin-off of the original Painkiller. The main protagonist is Belial. He is a half-angel, half-demon, and is shunned by all. He was apparently in purgatory for a very long time until Daniel kills Lucifer in the first Painkiller. Belial comes out because he's free from his cage and basically goes on a rampage and kills everyone he hates. And he really just does that for the whole story. I mean, he really doesn't go anywhere. He just kills everyone. Belial as a protagonist is more on that later. The setup is actually kind of interesting, I guess. Painkiller Overdose is basically just Painkiller. Now, Painkiller is a very old school shooter and you shoot everything that moves. No strategy at all. Kill everything. Kill them all. This game actually, though, is a bit different from the original Painkiller. The weapons in the game are actually new, with some returning weapons. The returning weapons are as follows. The Painkiller is now a cube of hell. The shotgun is now a demonic shotgun, and the minigun rocket launcher returns. And those are the only ones that return. Now for new weapons, there is like this stake gun that is a combo of the super stake gun and the regular one from the original Painkiller, and it shoots grenades, so that's kind of returning. You also get this like scream sonic wave head thing that shoots lasers that is pretty decent. There's like a chemical gun that shoots wads of chemicals or something and has like a flamethrower secondary fire. And finally you get this sword that shoots skull heads, and you can also throw it like a boomerang. That's pretty weird. All the weapons are pretty good, and the new ones, they're alright, except for really the sword. That doesn't make any sense. But they're alright. In terms of enemies, they're almost all new, and they all have original attacks and everything. There's a ton of enemies, and they all look cool and do cool things. The levels in this game actually have a pretty high amount of variety. Like, almost every level is completely different from the next. The tarot cards return, the souls return, and they're as useful as they always were. And really, that's it for Painkiller Overdose's gameplay. You just go around and kill literally just fucking everything. I mean, I gotta say, I like the locales in this game. They're pretty cool. The first couple levels are really dark, and they're like dark as hell and look like shit, but later levels like the Disney one are pretty decent. And the game does look dated for the time, but it was a mod originally, and it was just barely dated. I had no frame rate problems or optimization problems. The game doesn't have any modern resolutions, but really it was okay. This game came out in 2007. The graphics were a bit under average, but that's not really a problem because this game it's basically an indie title. And I mean, indie titles in 2007 really weren't real. The sound in the game was so-so. The music is okay at best. I mean, it's not heavy metal, it's not really anything. It's just music. I guess I really don't have anything to say about it. I didn't really listen to it. It could be better, it's just there. The sound effects in the game are pretty lame though. The Painkiller sounds the same, the new sound effects are kind of abysmal. The new enemies don't sound evil really at all. The only thing I really like from the sound effects is how the rocket launcher sounds, and that's about it. I mean, everything else is just there. The enemies, they just sound like generic enemies. I don't really have anything to comment on. Now there's the voice acting. There's Belial. Now Belial has decent voice acting. His lines are decent. What he says is okay, but in terms of annoying, he is extreme. He's one of the most annoying protagonists I have ever heard. He is like 10 quotes, and they get repeated over and over and over. Some quotes are okay, but they keep repeating over and over. And it just becomes annoying, and it's the same shit. And then at the beginning of every level he'll say something, and sometimes these are funny, like the one about Disney, but most of the time he's just annoying as fuck. But in terms of voice acting and as a character, he's okay. Now Painkiller Overdose is actually a pretty decent game. It does have a few problems with it. The first is the load times are terrible. They can take 15 seconds to about a minute, and that's pretty bad. I mean, dying and then waiting like a minute to come back and then die again, that's terrible. And another thing is the game can actually get pretty boring and repetitive. I mean, the Painkiller HD and the original Painkiller had a high amount of variety, but this game, I don't know, maybe I just got a little bored with it. But, well, the levels are varied. Some of them can take a little too long, and the souls take forever to show up. And there's a bit of glitches. Like, people claim that there are balancing issues, but I really didn't see that. The game is pretty decently long, though. I mean, it's around an 8-hour game, and this is like kind of an expansion, kind of. The game's just mindless fun, and you may like it or hate it. I was originally going to review the game alone, but I didn't feel that it deserved its own review, and I don't feel that the next 3 games deserve their own review either. So Painkiller Overdose is a slightly above average game in all in all, and if you like old school shooters, you should check it out, but that's about it. Everyone else could pretty much just steer clear of it. So Overdose was a decent game that people either liked or hated, but everyone just pretty much wanted a continuation of the real Painkiller. Well, the next game that was coming out was going to do this. Apparently it had new levels, sort of open world, new graphics, new weapons, an interesting story. And the game I'm going to look at is Painkiller Resurrection, released in 2009, the grave of the Painkiller games. So this game came out in 2009. There's a standalone expansion where you play as this guy named Bill, a killer guy who kills bad people. I was about to kill some gangsters with some C4 when all of a sudden a bus of innocents show up. So well, Bill tries to stop it, but everyone dies in the end. Bill ends up in purgatory where he can redeem himself. Along the way he meets one of Lucifer's generals and pisses him off, and an angel who betrays him, and Bill kills both of them. And that I will save for the end of the review. So Painkiller Resurrection, how do I put it simple? The game killed Painkiller. Overdose didn't, like, some people didn't like it, but most people would say it wasn't terrible. Now this game, simply put, is horrible. This is one of the worst first-person shooters I've ever played in my life. I mean, I really have nothing good to say about this game at all. The game, at first glance, is more Painkiller. The weapons are the same, except there's one new addition, and it's like it's kind of like a rapid-fire stake gun with napalm bombs. And, I mean, that's okay, but really, what's the point? The enemies are the same from previous Painkiller games and all behave the same way. Now let me talk about the issues with this piece of shit. Okay, the story, it's not great. It's not terrible, but it's not even on, it's on like the same level as Overdose. I really have no problem with the cutscenes themselves. I have no problems with. They're pretty cool the way the cutscenes were. I mean, like Max Payne style. I felt those were cool. But this game, when it comes to gameplay, is horrid. Where do I begin? I'm going to begin with the most glaring issue of them all. The graphics are terrible. This game came out in 2009 and it looks like complete shit. Even Overdose looked better than this game. This game looks horrid. Ugly does not describe how bad this game looks. I mean, my god. How hard is it just to up the graphics a little? Not make them worse. The textures in this game are god-awful. It's just random colors on rocks and cement and shit like that. I mean, every rock is like the same. It's generic rock this, generic rock that. I mean, and all the models are the same from the original Painkiller. What the fuck? The weapons are the same. Now, the optimization and the frame rate, and hell, the stability of the game is the worst in the whole series. Like, in terms of optimization and really just running the game, it is atrocious. Like, the graphics glitch out all the time. Modern resolutions aren't supported. This game came out in 2009. The frame rate is terrible. It drops all the time. I mean, just pitiful frame rate. It was all fine in Painkiller. Why isn't it fine now? And then whenever you use the stake gun and kill an enemy, it glitches out completely. The enemies always glitch out. They just ragdoll, glitch out, whatever. The physics don't even work. The jibs don't work. Okay, so the next glaring issue is the enemies in general. I mean, they just don't work. They get stuck, they glitch everywhere, they have trouble even getting to you, and then when you kill them, they have trouble disappearing, they get stuck on shit, and it really makes me wonder what the fuck is wrong with this game. I mean, the level design. Now, the level design is, my god, the worst level design I've ever seen in a first-person shooter, and some of the worst level design I've ever seen in my life. I mean, the developers claimed it was open-ended, but that's complete horseshit. It's kind of open-ended for like 2 levels, but why would anyone want that in a Painkiller game? You can skip enemies entirely. Fuck them. This level design was made by madmen. It's so god-awful. I mean, there isn't a single part that's like a normal first-person shooter. Every room, area, it's crazy retarded. Like, the first level has you go through this like tiny spot in this fucking retarded staircase. It's in the first 10 minutes of the game. How could you do this in the first 10 minutes of the game? It only gets worse with horrible mountain levels that are incredibly glitchy and just horribly made. I mean, it's difficult to travel through the levels. I mean, it's hard to travel through them. It's that bad that figuring out where to go is a whole nother problem also. I mean, and then the final level, the developers were high when they made this shit. It's so bright and there's no draw distance at all. You're just trying to figure out where the hell to go. I mean, some fucking retards made this shit. These homegrown game or whatever, whoever made this game, you guys are retarded. And also the load times are terrible. This is by far the worst Painkiller in the series and one of the worst first-person shooters I've ever played. I mean, if you can't even get just like walking around a level right, then what are you doing? I mean, the design is so horrible, nothing can function in this game. It's killed the whole game. Horrible graphics, bad music, except the last song, questionable narrative, and the voice acting. The voice acting is very questionable. This game is a fucking mess. I mean, how can you even make a level like this? How can anyone even think of this shit? Like, this should be awarded. It's so crazy and stupid. I mean, the worst is probably the third level, where you go like up a mountain then down it. The graphics are glitching out all over the place. You can fall off and have to start the whole level over. Going upstairs is nearly impossible. Like, this is just literally a clusterfuck of shit everywhere. And the music sucks. And then let me get to the endings. There's actually 3 endings. I don't know how it's determined, but the ending I got was a piece of shit, where Bill comes back, and then he dies again and goes to hell forever. Are you kidding me? I just sat through this like 4.5 to 5 hour piece of shit and I get that as my ending? I mean, like, this game is so bad that it's like funny. I mean, it's like funny how horrible these levels are. How anyone could have thought that, who passed this? I mean, so don't play this game. You can ignore this game completely. I mean, I don't know how anyone came up with this horrid thing, but this game is absolute garbage. Atrocious crap. It's one of the worst games I've seen in a while, and one of the worst first-person shooters I've ever played. Absolute waste of time. So, the next game I'm going to talk about is titled Painkiller Redemption, that came out a bit later after this game. Now, Painkiller Redemption was made with no new assets. What does that mean? It's basically a mod. There's nothing new at all. The story is about Belial and Daniel getting together to kill Eve, and from the end of the battle out of hell. The maps are all the original Painkillers multiplayer maps. No joke. And each level has like 1,000 enemies in it. So you will see these maps a lot. No new weapons, no new enemies, like one new cutscene or so, and that's it. This game switches off between Daniel and Belial. It doesn't matter though. The design and the game are still rectum. Like, they throw so many enemies at you. It is insane how many enemies they will throw at you. It's absolute carnage, and not in the good way. You will get bored in minutes. I mean, they will throw in these tiny areas, and you'll have to kill like 100 enemies. I am not exaggerating. The first level of the game has over 1,000 enemies. The level design is not as bad as the last game, but it sucks. The pacing is horrid. I mean, you never have enough ammo. You just never do. They just never give you enough ammo. And it's so damn repetitive. Fuck this expansion pack. It's not as bad as Resurrection, but it's close. I mean, it's still not worth playing at all. I mean, when they throw this many enemies at you in a small area, what are they thinking? Who asked for this? Like, who legitimately asked for this? Oh, I want 1,000 enemies in a tiny-ass map. Who wanted this? I mean, it's just shit. Wave after wave after wave in the same area when you run out of ammo so quickly. How hard is it to make a Painkiller game? Okay, so the final Painkiller expansion I'm going to look at is Recurring Evil. This game was released in 2012 and is the last expansion released for Painkiller that's standalone, and I swear it better be the last one. This game was made by the same people who made Redemption, only I think there's a couple new assets. I think. The game is about Bill from Resurrection, the Guardian of Purgatory now, which is one of the endings in Painkiller Resurrection, but I don't even know how to get it. And apparently he gets sent by Samael to an unknown part of Purgatory and has to fight more demons. The maps aren't multiplayer maps, I don't think anyway, I'm not sure. There's nothing really online about this game. Like, I think 2 of the maps are, but some of them don't seem like they could be multiplayer maps. Well, what I will say is you kill everything that moves, and there isn't any new weapons or enemies, but this game doesn't totally go insane with the enemies like Redemption. It's not actually that bad. I mean, this game, I will say, isn't awful like Redemption or Resurrection. I would say it's just a bit under average. I mean, it's short, and it wasn't totally made like shit, and you can actually maneuver around the levels, and there isn't an insane amount of enemies. I mean, this is the only Painkiller expansion that actually also supports modern resolution, so kudos to them, besides Hell and Damnation. However, I think nobody, and I mean nobody, should play any of these games. I mean, Overdose, that's a maybe, but everyone else, all the other games, steer clear. Stay away. I mean, all these games are in a bundle together, and if you're curious on playing them, which you shouldn't be, you can get the whole series for dirt cheap now, and I mean most of them are pretty shitty. The 3 I steer clear of like all of these except Overdose. Overdose you might like. With Painkiller in general, this is why Painkiller is what it is, Painkiller, where you go around and kill everything that moves. I mean, 3 games, all garbage pretty much, all the same. And I mean, I don't like these games. You shouldn't like these games. There's much better old school first person shooters you could play. Go play the original Painkiller, Painkiller Hell and Damnation, and maybe even Overdose if you're curious. These 3 other Painkiller games are garbage. And I'll see you guys on my next review where I review a classic platformer.